Welcome to The Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learn to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. All right, welcome to The Friday Habit. Ben, how are you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing good. I'm doing well.
Hey, well, today we have a very special guest. We got Cole Rodgers on the podcast today. He's the founder of School of Man. Cole is an entrepreneur, life coach, and speaker who is dedicated to helping men reach their full potential and live their best lives. Cole is, for over a decade, experience in coaching and mentoring and has helped countless men achieve their goals in both their personal and professional lives. Cole, welcome to The Friday Habit.
Guys, I am extremely grateful to be here with you. In fact, that's how I like to start off any meeting, any podcast interview, or just when I just meet somebody, right? I think our world needs more gratitude in it. It helps us expand our perspective. And for me, you know, I'm just here to leave people better than I find them. And I love what you're doing. I love everything about your mission. And I can't wait. This is going to be a ton of fun. This is right up my alley. So I don't want to suck up too much of the oxygen, but I'm ready to get after it.
All right. Well, hey, I got a would you rather or either or.
Okay.
Sauna or cold plunge?
Oh man, I do a lot of both. So I'm an ice bath junkie. And
okay.
what I do, I'm fortunate enough, I do have a full blown sauna, but then I also have a sauna attached to my pool. And I'm in Central Arkansas, so Little Rock, and the water will get down to my pool, high 30s, low 40s. And then my sauna gets up to 104. So what I do every week is do the cold plunge, but I go back and forth between that 104 and to the pool. I swim in it, tread water, and then I take cold showers. And then on the sauna side, man, I like it. I like to see how hot I can crank it up. Now I have an infrared here, but you can kind of biohack those by putting a wine cork on the thermostat and putting insulation on the top. And so there's so many ways to do it. And for those that are listening, disclaimer: when you do that, you pretty much throw out the warranty of anything of any kind. So,
right.
But I am very much addicted to the art of being limitless. And now I've not always been like that. Now, if you haven't watched Hemsworth documentary Limitless, go and watch it. It's great. But, if you'll look at it in my library, you'll see books by Ben Greenfield, from Boundless to Aubrey Marcus with Own Your Day. But, there's a program we run in School of Man called Fuel, Freedom Unlocked Equals Lasting Change. And that's really to help men keep the old man out of the body at the end of the day. So, but you'll see me doing a lot of wild and crazy stuff, and a lot of stuff I just don't post to social media, right?
Yeah, so just your personal stuff. Well, hey, we have women who listen to our show too, but today we kind of just wanted to focus on what it means to be a man, and I would say this is that, and this is from me, my personal experience is that, I don't think I was demonstrated a lot of masculinity, and being a business owner, I have to I have to engage in conflict. I have to close a sale. I have to fire somebody. I have to tell somebody that they need to improve. And as I was kind of probably in my mid 30s, I kind of started to kind of evaluate myself and try to figure out, like, why are these things hard for me to do, or why do I have a propensity to avoid conflict, And I think some of it I felt came down to was a level of masculinity that I lacked because I was never shown that, And so, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your story, of how you kind of started and where, how you kind of got into mentoring and coaching men.
Wow. Well, I'm not going to take you all the way back to childhood, because that would turn into a 3 to 4 hour Jocko podcast.
This is not a Joe Rogan or Jocko podcast.
A long form podcast. I love those guys and listen to them. But I can definitely give you glimpses of my life, especially the ones that are heavily laden with meaning. So many of us, we forget all the great things that happen in our life because we've been trained to focus on the gaps. If you give people a black and white picture, men and women both, majority of the time, their eyes are going to fixate on the dark instead of the light. We've been taught since we were little kids, both men and women, to look at the gaps instead of saying, I got 17 out of 20 right. We're like, how many did you get wrong right out the gate? Right. And that's just how our culture has been built over time. But kind of going back to your comment on conflict, and then I'll get into a little bit about my story and then, my entrepreneurial spirit, my business, and how I've developed that along the way. And of course, I'm not a sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns guy. I mean, I'm one of those that I give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of my life. I'm a perfectly flawed man. I think that's a very important attribute for any entrepreneur, any leader, especially if you're leading teams to walk into. Vulnerability is a key attribute of mine, but that has to be developed like a muscle. But going back to conflict, I don't know of anybody in your defense that is really, really good at conflict, and people are getting worse at it by the day, just simply due to the addiction to technology, the ease of text messaging somebody, the ease of sending an email and it being passive aggressive, the ease of just avoiding a hard, critical conversation. And if you weren't brought up in an environment and or a family culture to where you work through things, you agreed to disagree. I mean, look at our political environment, and this isn't a political statement, but it's so polarizing. You're told to choose one side or the other. And I don't believe, that's how America works, right? We are an agree to disagree and find common ground, and we make each other better. But nonetheless, from a conflict piece, I'll give you a little tidbit for anybody that's looking to raise their level of accountability as a leader, as a man. And leadership is a very broad term. There have been thousands of books and podcasts written about and talked about it and all that good stuff. And people always ask me, it's like, how do you hold people accountable? How do you embrace in hard conversations and conflict where that other person walks away better than you find them, and you do as well? You don't engage in emotion. People give into the emotions way too much. And before you correct anybody, this is very key. Before you correct anybody, you have to connect with that person. So, connect before you correct. Right. And I always use a sandwich method when it comes to conflict. First and foremost, understand, like, whoever it is that's sitting in that chair, it could be your wife, it could be your husband, it could be your employee, it could be also your CEO. Maybe you're going up levels, right? And you need to make sure you have a connection first. And then you do the sandwich. You basically, you walk in and you talk about the things that are going well. Then in the middle, you talk about the things we need to work on. Then you bring it around and you talk about where we go from here and the greatness you see in them. Unless you're at that phase in a relationship to where you do have to let people go. And that's another thing, and again, that's for maybe a different time. People are so scared to let people go in their lives. And that's honestly the best thing to do for them. And it's the best thing to do for you because your proximity equals influence. But going back to conflict, people just get all worked up. They haven't dealt with it really well. They haven't seen how, and it was never demonstrated in their home on how to deal with it. But just to keep it simple, connect before you correct. Connect before you communicate, because everybody communicates, very few connect. And that's really a good jumping off point, within my career and my business. And, for me, I was brought up in modest beginnings. My parents, who are still married, thank goodness, my mother and father are, never really showed me how to resolve conflict in a marriage. They always fought behind closed doors. That's kind of how that worked, right?
Yeah. And then when you have arguments in your own relationship, you're like, well, my parents were perfect. They never fought. They never.
Oh, man. I have blown my marriage up more than once. I'm telling you, brother, like, my wife will tell you, and I don't know the rules around cussing on this show, but she will tell you straight up, like, those first 6 years of my marriage, I was a complete ass. I mean, I just was very self-absorbed, very self-centered. It was all about me, but that's a part of the story too. So, when I got into the game, when I got into the business, as men, we are taught to benchmark ourselves on three things, and it's it's as simple. It's athletics, it's money, and it's sex. Those are the three simple things. Just think how we're marketed to in today's world. Think about watching the Super Bowl. Think about it's gambling, right? It's you know,
it's got everything: money, sex, and athletics.
Money, sex. I mean, and athletics, right? And every bit of the advertising it could be like the new electric vehicle that's coming out, the Ford Lightning or whatever it is. There's a status built around that aspect of it. So when you get in the game and you're an alpha like me, you know, there's two sides of the alpha. There's the unhealthy side. And then, of course, there's the rebirth process that gets you to the healthy side. And a large part of my mission is to help those alphas be reborn, because we have more men who continue to wear more masks. We have suicide rates going up, depression going up. And these are statistics in some of the most highly successful men on this planet on paper. Yeah. And, you know, so with that being said, a lot of lessons have been learned along the way. I call them crucible moments. And, you know, at 21, when I got in the game, I mean, I was making $18,000 a year. Like that's how I started. Like I didn't say, you know what, I'm going to get in and start making $500,000 or 250 or what that number was. I got in on the ground floor and I wanted to learn sales. And that's what my dad did. My dad grew up dirt poor. He raised both of his brothers. His dad was not around most of his life. It was my grandmother working 2 jobs, right? So, you know, for him to go up the ranks in his corporation, because that's all he knew. He didn't know entrepreneurship really. He just knew hard work, make money, take care of family. You know, it's a middle class mindset, but you know, he was the first in his bloodline to honestly break 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. So he redefined that for the Rodgers family name, because it has been riddled with divorce, drugs, and crime up to that point. So raising his 2 brothers, you know, it puts a lot of perspective in me. And here he is busting his ass to give every opportunity to myself and my sisters. My mom was one of 7. She was the baby of 7, from a traditional Italian Catholic family, the Paladinos, and raised on a farm, you know, but money was not of an importance in their life. It was the farm. It was the family. You know, it's a very different, and my family's still very connected, just a very different lifestyle than what the American people really are get to see, right? And I get to live it every single day. So I got to see 2 different worlds really growing up. I got to see the world with my mother, that it was church, it was family, it was Sunday meals, it was we got each other's back, and stress was low. Hence why my family's lived into their 90s and they eat farm to table food. And then I got to see the other side of high divorce rate, drugs, aunts and rehab, stuff like that. And my dad being the patriarch and ultimately seeing that. So as I get in the game, and that's where I'm going with this, you know, that's where I was brought up. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to climb the corporate ladder, because no one taught me what entrepreneurship looked like. I mean, in 4th grade, I was selling stuff out of my desk to kids in my class. I would make stuff at my house and sell it to them. And I would amass like mounts of quarters and money. And the teachers finally made me stop because I couldn't fit my books in there. I would literally, I'd sell them stuff, right? And so I always had that spirit, is what I'm saying. So when I got into it, though, it was one of those like, hey, my dad got me an opportunity in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's another key, is people need to move outside of their zip code. You got to get uncomfortable, right? And it's really easy in today's virtual environment. But yeah, so like get out of your zip code. And that was really good for me. And that was a time when there wasn't the iPhone. I mean, it was 2005, 2006. You had the big Garmins, and I didn't know where I was in Nashville, Tennessee. But there were just these little obstacles that became major victories, major cookie jar moments for me, like passing my insurance test at the time and navigating Nashville and creating a network and learning the art of effort. I mean, that it will trump talent all day long. And I got to see 18,000 grow to 42,000 and 42,000 grow to 100,000. And so that I got the taste, right? Like I got the understanding and the correlation that my effort will result in a reward, but there was eventually going to be a ceiling because of me working for corporate America.
Right.
And I didn't really like that. In addition to that, too, from 21 to 26, I mean, that's a very self-absorbed time of our lives, right? Like, I cared about money. I cared about being rookie of the year. I cared about making headways and conquering goals and being able to pound my chest when I go back to Little Rock. Like, look at me. I can pick up the bar tab, baby. Cole's in town. Let's go party, right? So, to all you young bulls out there, it's one of those things you need to be very, very careful, because along the way, what you don't realize is you start developing these insecurities, and it's tied right back to your ego, and it becomes really, really inflamed. And that's where I was really in those early 20s. And in the generation, I'm 39 years young. I'm on the back end of being a millennial. My group was brought up through the Adderall days. Adderall was the thing from 2001 to 2005 when you were studying, and everybody could get it, right? Like, it was one of those deals. And it's not me bragging. It's just the truth. What started in the library became a party drug for everybody. And you didn't look at it like that. You're like, oh man, it's not Oxy. It's not a Hydro or anything like that. I'm not putting a Percocet in a slushie. No, it's an Adderall to give me focus.
Got it from the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, anybody, go watch Dope Sick and that docu-series. Go watch Dope Sick on stuff like that. But to that point, what I'm saying is you accumulate these habits, right? Habits in habit formation can work in two ways. You can either develop habits that are going to make you the GOAT, the greatest of all time, or you can develop habits that can make you the villain. Because, and again, that's where you are tricking yourself. And that was one of them. I would go to Adderall to give me an edge. I would go to Adderall to give me more focus, because I was seeing upwards of 5,000 people per year face to face in what I was doing at that time, which gave me a lot of my emotional intelligence and social intelligence that I use today, because every one of us communicate, but very few of us connect. And then when I hit 27 and really to now, that's when, I met the woman of my dreams, and I met her when I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina. I took a promotion, and it was within a big health insurer that everybody knows, but I was starting to get tired of I thought that I was going to climb this corporate ladder. Then I got to thinking in my mid-20s, and this was before podcasts were really real popular. I was like, man, I don't want to be like some of these people. Nothing against them. Like in 50, when I'm 50 or when I'm 60, and and I'm not being derogatory. Please understand that, because it's provided a lot of good livings for people, and it has for my family. So that's where I started really like questioning everything. It's like, man, I need to go out on my own. Like, I'm going to be, and this is what I would tell every entrepreneur out there, or anybody that's thinking about it, is you're going to be more disappointed in the things you didn't do 20 years from now than the things you actually did do. And that's just the truth. As the saying goes, discipline weighs in ounces, regret weighs in tons. But at that time, I was also ready to get married. I was also ready to start a family. And that created its own level of challenges, because that doesn't come with a playbook, right? And so with that, Ashley and I ended up getting married, and I decided to cut the cord with corporate America. And I decided to go at 27, pretty much on my own, strike out on my own adventure in the insurance business, develop my own business. That was my core business. And I've always had a burning passion to help people from high school to junior high. I was that guy looking out for the underdog, because I was an underdog myself. I got the crap kicked out of me on the bus, after basketball games by upperclassmen. So I was bullied. So I always had an affinity, to help others maximize their potential and stand up, to the big bad wolf, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I've always had that burning desire, but I always told myself, not yet, not yet. And I think that's another fallacy that we buy into, is that we think success is a certain destination. It's like when I hit 30 or when I hit 35 and I hit 38 or whatever that the number you have in your mind, then I'll give myself permission to do this. Right. That's crap, because this life is fragile. You have no clue when that 1 second will be up.
We're not promised tomorrow.
No. And for those first 6 years, it's definitely from 27 to 33. It was the most trying times up to this point in my life. And I wasn't necessarily equipped as a man to handle it. What I would do is I'd push it down. I would have Jack and Coke when I'd come home. In that first 3 years in particular in the business, I wasn't making any money. And my wife and I were married. I blew out my Achilles playing basketball. I had 2 surgeries. And I spent a week in the hospital, almost lost my right leg due to a staph infection.
Wow.
Right. And I would literally have my mom drive me around because it was my right foot, and I would cold call on businesses. I would crutch up and cookie call businesses, and she'd be in the car. And then we go to the next one. Then we go to the next one. Then we go to the next one. And I'll never forget, after my daughter, Ava Madison, was born, she flatlined. And it was a year after my wife and I had gotten married. And she had flatlined. You would have thought that would have woke me up. But what it did is it accelerated. And she's fine. She's great. She's a gift from God. Like the girl's going to do amazing things. But it just accelerated everything, because I had to feed another mouth. You know, my wife was an accountant, and here I am not making very much money at all. And I remember that Christmas having to return a barbecue magazine because we needed the money for her formula. And I wouldn't ask for money from my parents, and she wouldn't ask money from her parents. But what we did during our marriage, and that's the key here, is that, and I see this in a lot of men of all ages, is that it's really, really easy to focus on the easy stuff. It's really, really hard to focus on the things you actually need to put your attention to. And that was me actually self-healing. That was me ripping the Band-Aids off of the scars on my heart, which that's what people do throughout their life. They put duct tape, scar, Band-Aids, whatever they want to do. And they push that stuff down, and it just leaks out. So I got really addicted to lying to her, and it's just due to shame, right? Like, it was just due to shame. But, and I'm glad that we experienced that part of our lives, because it tested every fiber of our marriage. And then our son was born, and I started making some more money. The business started growing, and it started ginning upwards, but I was still dealing with this dark side of my soul, the self-sabotage side of my soul. If, Cole, your bank account reaches 500,000 or your income gets to $1 million or whatever that number is, everything should take care of itself, right? Like, she should be happy. You're giving her the lifestyle. She's getting to stay home with the kids. And then what you become, though, through that is a very entitled man. There's a lot of entitlements in this world. Welfare isn't just from the government. We feed ourselves welfare every single day, and a bunch of lies and bullshit. And that's just where I was. So needless to say, I was brought to my knees, and we started therapy. It was the greatest thing. And then I told myself, and this is where it really gets fun and interesting. I said, if I am to save this thing, then I've got to do something that I've never done before to have something I've never had before. And, that was freedom for me, because I was miserable. I mean, I had set records in my business, from where I was in the industry compared to industry benchmark. I had accomplished everything I saw in my mind's eye, but my marriage was complete shit. Like, it was just, so when that's off, everything else is off. And then when I needed an edge, guess what? I'll put it to you this way, guys. Like, when she was pregnant with my son, I took her to Oxford, Mississippi. I went out while she was pregnant. She didn't know it. I didn't know it. I went out and partied all night, only for me to come back in, for her to wake up and me make a cup of coffee and me act like I hadn't been gone, only to get pulled over by a state trooper on the way back, and him to look at me and say, "I'm going to let you out of this because she's giving you the death stare." So that's just where I was. Right. And I would do these things to sabotage myself because I felt I wasn't worthy of success internally, right? A lot of us want to we'll crank up that internal thermostat to 100, but we'll figure out a way to cool ourselves back down to 60 because of the upper limit effect. And so it was just this civil war for goodness gracious. It just seemed like I'd have 90 to 120 days and great. And then that dark side of the soul would lurk in, and I would just basically just fall in line with whatever it wanted to do. And so what I decided to do was, I hadn't ran a mile in 3 years because of the Achilles tear. Super nervous. You know, is my left Achilles going to blow? But I just knew I had to do something radical and chase after my future self. I had this vibrant vision of my future self. Love life was in the tank, the whole 9 yards. So I decided to link up with a group of SEALs out of Southern California and went on a journey that's just incredible, and ended up graduating from a 3-day simulation of Hell Week. And I was one of 9 out of 50 to do that.
Oh, wow.
It was 1 out of 9 out of 50. And it's a big story in and of itself. But what it taught me over 18 months is the importance of developing a future self, believing in that future self. You know, you're not going to be an overnight success, and trusting the process. You know, it takes time, and really force functioning yourself and developing these environments that were going to produce the results you most desire. And that's where things started turning for me, because I had to sober up to the fact that, man, if I don't get this together, doesn't matter how much money I make, I'm about to lose everything that's really important to me.
All right, we're going to pause this conversation here. Go to thefridayhabit.com. There you can find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. At the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit System that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear next week's episode, subscribe so you get notified. Also, leave us a review in Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to potentially be on one of our episodes with a question you ask us, go ahead and record a quick message in your phone, voice memo, and email it to hello@thefridayhabit.com. Until next time, live every day like it's Friday.